Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Let me introduce Tamblyn Calman on the right hand side of the screen there. He's our guest speaker today. Tamblyn, hi.
Hello, thanks for having me, David.
It's a pleasure. Tamblyn's from QNAP Systems. What do you do at QNAP, Tamblyn? Just to fill in.
So I currently manage the UK channel for QNAP and have done for around about 6 years.
Okay, brilliant. And Tamblyn and I actually met last week at the media production show in London for the first time, so that was good. And I got to see some of the QNAP stuff. So without further ado, let's just collapse my GoToMeeting stuff and move on to the next slide. So this is the webinar Wednesday for this month, and today we're going to be talking about using P5, Archiware P5 products on network attached storage products with specific reference to QNAP, which is why we've got Tamblyn here. So just to run through the platforms that P5 does run on the left-hand side, we've got our kind of traditional platforms, Windows, Mac OS and Linux. So we can run on any kind of hardware that will run those operating systems. And the Solaris and FreeBSD, that's the red icon, those ones have been kind of moved into a client-only mode now because we don't have many people running those as servers. Whoops. And on the right-hand side, we've got the NAS platforms that we support with QNAP, Synology, and Netgear. So these are NAS devices that all have a Linux-based software stack on them, which includes an app store through which you can browse and search and find software tools and install them directly onto your device. So that now includes the P5 software. So you can put that onto your QNAP and then start to do all the types of things which you can do with P5. And this is just a quick summary. I'm sure many of you already know a lot of this, but the product, the P5 suite, is broken down into these 4 modules. So going from left to right fairly quickly, P5 Backup is a disaster recovery product which takes a copy of your data so that if you have a failure, you don't lose anything. So that's a copy, as opposed to P5 Archive in the middle. Sorry, I'm trying to point, but I don't think it's working. P5 Archive, which is all about moving data from your primary storage, which could well be the storage on your NAS device, on your QNAP, so that doesn't need to fill up. You can have a controlled workflow where you migrate and move data to a different kind of storage. And today we're going to be looking specifically at how you can use a QNAP with tape storage to migrate data away into an archive off of the QNAP. P5 Synchronize is also a product that you can run on your NAS device, and this is cloning data. So rather than backing up or archiving in a workflow, P5 Synchronize is pure cloning of data to another host or from another host, and that could be another NAS device, it could be a mixture of Synology or QNAP, or it could be a QNAP and a Windows server, or a Mac with some storage, or any kind of Linux server. So we have a lot of possibilities there. I've got a slide about to talk about that in a little while. And then over on the right hand side, P5 Backup to Go is workstation backup. So this is backing up your Mac and PC desktop and laptop machines to a centralized piece of storage on the network, which again could be a NAS device and could specifically be a QNAP if that was the kind of NAS that you're interested in. And all of these modules, as it says at the bottom, can run together on the same network attached storage device at the same time. So you can build a workflow using multiple tools. So next slide. Target storage support. So when you are backing up or archiving, the P5 product suite allows you to back up or archive to disks. So that would be any vendor's disks, whether it's direct attached, network attached, or SAN. Or we support any kind of tape hardware, so from standalone drives to tape libraries in the middle there, and we support any generation of LTO, all the way from 1 up to 8, which is the current gen, and we support hardware from any vendor and LTO tape drives from any vendor. So whether that's HP, IBM, whatever kind of tape drive you want to use, whether it's attached by a fiber channel or SAS, we support everything, even Thunderbolt attached to direct to Macs. And then the third kind of storage that we support for backup and archive is the cloud, where we currently support Amazon S3, Glacier, Microsoft Azure, Backblaze, anything that's got the generic S3 compatible protocol, e.g. Wasabi or Alibaba, and we'll soon be adding Google's cloud storage as well. So a good full suite of cloud support for storage. So just to illustrate what the installation of P5 on a NAS might look like, here's an app center from a QNAP, and by searching for Archiware, we get to see both Archiware's P5 suite and also Pure, which has been released recently. Pure version 2 we now have, which is free and provides very sophisticated VMware backup onto a QNAP, so your QNAP can talk to your vSphere infrastructure and backup VMs directly back to the QNAP storage. Also runs on Synology. So let's just look at a couple of the workflows, and then Tamblyn's going to talk a little bit in more detail about the QNAP product. So if you wanted to use P5 Synchronize, which is the cloning product on your QNAP there on the left-hand side, then you could use the LAN or the WAN to clone data with other hosts, which could be Windows, Mac, Linux, QNAP, Synology, or Netgear. So if you've got an old Windows server, or even a new Windows server that you want to clone the data to a QNAP, then you can do that. You can do it in any direction. And if you've got some storage on a host at another office location over a wide area network, maybe a VPN in your home, in a data center, then you can use P5 Synchronize to make a scheduled, regular replication of your data, and it's file event based, so we can see which files have changed within a short period of time, identify those, and then send those over to the replica storage. And that can be in either direction, so you could be using the QNAP as the target for the clone of some other storage, or the other way around. The other thing that you could do with P5 on a QNAP is archive or backup. And as said a little bit earlier, that could be to disk at the top to any of those platforms. It could be LTO tape in the middle, or it could be cloud storage. So you can back up an archive to each of those. And in a moment, we're going to be specifically looking at archiving to an LTO tape drive attached to a QNAP, and that will be a SAS drive. Good point to mention that we have Archiware has a license called P5 Desktop Edition, which is a special offer this year, which provides you with, for just €1,000, $1,400 or 1,000 UK pounds, provides you with archive and backup to a single LTO tape drive with any number of tapes that you want to purchase. So for £1,000 or euros, you can have a very nice backup and archive connected up to your QNAP, starting at £1,000 for a single standalone drive. But also, if you have maybe a rack mount QNAP, then you could use that in conjunction with an LTO tape library and some more costly P5 licenses. So it doesn't have to be a single drive. We can scale up to a 50-slot quantum library or whatever you want to use. So let's have a little bit more detail on the QNAP products, Tamblyn, if you're happy to do that. I'll change the slides for you, and then you can talk, and we'll have a bit of a chat about what you're saying.
Sure. So obviously, general advantages of QNAP. I mean, so as we know, there's a lot of NAS vendors out there, and on the face of it, we all look very similar in terms of our hardware specs. We've 2, 4, 12A NAS products and bigger, and generally they use similar hardware, so Intel CPUs, RAM, all the rest of it. But what I think really differentiates QNAP as a NAS brand is our operating system, and some of the features that we're able to offer on the operating system, which some of the other vendors aren't able to. So I'll go in a bit more detail over one of these, but one of the things I want to talk about is virtualization station. So what that allows you to do is actually run virtual machines directly on the NAS, making use of the resources that are available to that NAS product. So if you're running a Xeon or i7 CPU with 16 gig of RAM, you can actually run a Windows server on the NAS for testing and development. If you're doing software updates, or maybe you need a bespoke application running on the network, perhaps like accounts packages, that type of thing, you can actually run it directly from the NAS box. We also support snapshotting, so you can do snapshot replication between multiple QNAP boxes, or you can just create a snapshot and store it locally. This can actually be done every 5 to 10 minutes if you like, which means if if a user deletes data by accident or amends a file that perhaps they didn't need to or didn't mean to edit, you can actually restore it really quickly through the snapshot application on the
we can use the snapshot feature, Tamblyn. So if you're doing the synchronize, if I just flick back to where we got that slide there where we're cloning data. So if you're cloning to a QNAP, we can create the snapshots of the data that's arriving on the QNAP device using QNAP's operating system snapshot facility, so that it's much faster than it would be if we were doing it the long way by creating file system links.
Okay, great.
I'll just flick back to where we were. Actually, shall I take you to that one?
Yeah, you can go on to that slide. So this is one of the other features that I wanted to just talk about. So obviously SSDs are becoming a lot more popular and a lot more affordable now, certainly in the NAS market. So we've introduced a feature which isn't just available on our enterprise products, it's actually available across the board, whether it's a 2-bay desktop or a 24-bay rack mount. And what this allows you to do is you can actually create 3 tiers of storage. So you can have the SATA high capacity drives as your third or your bottom tier. Then you can have a number of SSD drives configured as the second tier. And then if the NAS supports it, so some of our products support M.2 SSDs, which means you can actually have a third tier. So for anybody who's not too sure of tiered storage, what it means is as the data is accessed and used through people on the network, the system notices that and moves the data from the high capacity SATA drives gradually up through the tiers, the more and more it's accessed. Because, you know, obviously we may have 30-40 terabytes of storage in the NAS box, but actually we're probably only going to be using a few gigs or maybe even a terabyte of data on a daily basis. So what happens is that data that's been regularly accessed becomes really fast to access. And this is, like I said, this application and this feature is available across all of our products. All you need to do is just install the SSDs or the M.2 SSDs into the unit.
Cool. It's a really nice feature, isn't it? I like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that's been very common in the sort of tier 1 storage vendors out there, like the likes of HP and EMC. But it's now available on a more affordable platform like QNAP.
Yeah. It makes an enormous difference to the speed that the clients can get accessing the data, which is particularly important in the kind of media and broadcast spaces where people are using it for editing and post-production, VFX and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to just move on?
Yeah, there we go.
So as the first slide said, we're not just a NAS company. So certainly for the first few years of me working for QNAP, that's all we were, and that's all that people knew us for. But we've actually started to branch out into more the networking side. Obviously, this is just a small snapshot of some of the products that we do. So here we've got a 12-port and an 8-port unmanaged 10 gigabit switch. So just to explain, because this isn't particularly common in the market, so you either tend to buy a 10 gig RJ45 switch or an SFP 10 gig switch. And what the QSW1208 does is it allows you to mix both RJ45 and SFP connections in the switch, which is great for customers who maybe have a mix of network technologies in their infrastructure. And the unit on the right there is just a smaller version, so just slightly less ports, but the same principle.
Yep. I'll take you to the next one.
Yeah. So the products I'm just about to go through. So it's probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we first announced the 871T, which was the first Thunderbolt NAS product that we released. And to be quite frank, we were a little bit skeptical on how popular and how successful it was going to be. And well, 4 years later, we're now on the 3rd generation of Thunderbolt NAS, and it sells really well. We've just been at the media production show, which it went down really well there. And we're also doing a number of Thunderbolt accessories, which I'll go through on the next slide if you want to just go on one. So here we've got 3 different products. So there's a 4, 6, and 8-bay desktop NAS. So all 3 units come with 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports and 1 10 gigabit port. And the nice feature about this is it also has a spare PCIe slot, so you can install a SAS card and make use of the P5 application to do the backup directly from the NAS to a tape drive.
Yep. So these are So those Thunderbolt 3 ports would allow you, for example, in a post-production setting, to have 3 Mac, let's say iMac Pros, each connecting via a Thunderbolt cable with loads of bandwidth direct to the QNAP.
Yep.
And then you'll run the IP protocol over Thunderbolt, so it will show up in your Mac system pref for the network as an IP interface, as a network interface. So you'll get 10 gigs worth of bandwidth to use with SMB protocol or NFS or whatever you want to use to access the storage. But it's more of a SAN environment because you've got lots of speed. And it's a shared storage, so you get proper file locking just as you would do if you were accessing it over Ethernet.
And that's a really good thing. So it's, you know, it's not just Thunderbolt storage. It is still a NAS. You know, you can still use it for all the other usual NAS functionality, like just storing regular data on there, but also have, like you say, you can have 2 Macs connected in there, and you can even directly connect in via the 10 gig port as well from a 10 gig ready PC. You can even use, which is on the next slide, one of our Thunderbolt 10 gig adapters, which I'll go through.
Actually, before you do that, I was going to say the i5, so the top left 8-bay unit is an i5 Core i5 Intel chip, which means that one of the things that P5 can do when archiving is generate previews and proxies of video and audio and still images, and store those thumbnails, store those and display them as thumbnails, which we'll see in a sec when I do a demo. So having the i5 processor in there means that there's lots of horsepower for doing that bit of transcoding that's required to present those thumbnails to people in the UI.
Just to also just go through with people, just in case anyone's interested, the pricing for, well, the list pricing for those 3 products for the 4-bay is around about £1,000 MSRP. The 6-bay is 1,200, and then the 8-bay is 1,400.
Wow, so it's quite impressive.
Yeah,
considering what you get. Okay, I'll take you back to that slide.
Yeah, this is just showing the throughput. So when we were doing media production show last week, this is the sort of throughput we were getting from we had a MacBook Pro there, connected via Thunderbolt 3 to the 872. So the 872 at the time we had it configured with 8 Kingston SSDs, and this is the throughput we were getting through the Thunderbolt 3 connection.
Yeah.
Nice. And I'd just like to add as well, we support Adobe Premiere and Final Cut Pro as well.
Yep.
So you can use those in conjunction with this product.
So you could be doing editing with like 4K video probably with that kind of
speed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So next one, Thunderbolt 3 to 10 gig Ethernet. I was impressed by how low the cost was for this when we were discussing it earlier.
Yeah, so this is something we've only released this year. So we've released 2 versions. So one with an RJ45 10 gig connection, and one with an SFP connection. So what this allows you to do is go from a Thunderbolt 3 connection on your PC or Mac, and it gives you a 10 gig Ethernet connection. The pricing is around about £70 for the RJ45 connection, and I think it's around about £85–90 for the SFP version. But really simple to use. If you're connecting it to a Mac, you don't require any drivers. Literally just plug it in, plug the network cable in, and away you go. Windows does require a driver, but it's free of charge. You can just download it from our website. I think if you
when you compare the cost of one of those adapters versus if you were connecting to a SAN via fiber channel and buying a Thunderbolt to SAN adapter, which is a lot more money, probably an order of sort of 10 times the cost, I'm sort of guessing, just for the bridge to connect to the fiber channel, and then you've got the cost of the fiber channel switch and the fiber channel SAN. So you're getting 10 gigs of speed for a really good price, including the cost of those adapters. Yeah.
And this is just showing the 2 different versions we've got. So obviously the one on the left is the RJ45 connection, copper, and then the one on the right there is SFP. So the one on the left supports both, well, 10 gig, 5 gig, 2.5, 1 gig, and 100 meg if you need it to.
Cool. Okay. So we're going to do a little demo now. And then we'll look at the roadmap for LTO, but let's just get that out of the way. So in my browser here, I've got a QNAP, which is, we were looking to see which one it was. It's a TVS 473. It's actually remote to me. It's not in the same building as me, so I can't tell you how big it is. Do you know how big that one is? Is it what it says in the picture, Tamblyn? Is it a 4-bay?
It is, yeah. It's a 4-bay using an AMD CPU.
Cool. And under File Station here, I've got a folder of JPEGs, and there's a movie which we're going to archive to tape. So on this NAS, we have P5 installed. So there's P5, and we also have Pure installed, but P5 is the one that we're going to look at. Now P5 will show up on the desktop of the NAS. I've already got P5 open in a browser here. Let me just refresh this to make sure that it's not timed out. And so that folder of JPEGs, if I just flick back to it, is a load of work, let's say, that I'm finished with and I want to archive it to tape and get it off my NAS so I can get on with some other work. So archiving that within P5 is quite simple. So under the Archive tab of P5's web interface, we can see I've already added the Tandberg LTO 6 half-height drive, so you can see that in there. And under volumes, we can see that I have one tape so far. I've just got a single tape, and that's labeled up into P5 into a pool called Tape Archive, so we know about that tape. And you can see there's about a gigabyte that I've archived to that tape so far, just testing earlier today to make sure everything was going to work, to show you now. I've got an archive plan configured here, which is already set up. And what this archive plan will do, just really quickly, important bits are, it's going to delete files that we've archived, and it's going to generate previews of images and videos using ImageMagick and FFmpeg. So that's running directly on the QNAP, those two open source tools. They're quite easy to install on the QNAP. So without further ado, within the interface here, I can go into my manual archiving tab. I can do automatic archiving as well, and I can browse directly into this multimedia share and the webinar folder so that I can see a live view of the same folder that we were looking at in the QNAP web interface. So here's my movie, here's the JPEGs. So let's say I want to archive all but one of these JPEGs. I can add that to my archive selection. So I get this little palette opens up in P5 and shows me what I'm archiving, and I could browse around and choose other folders or files that I want to archive. And then when I'm ready to actually run the job, I just click the archive button down at the bottom. If I wanted to, I could type webinar as a description to help me find this, this data later. And then clicking start will start the job off. So if we were in the room with the tape drive right now, we'd hear some whirring and whizzing. And if I click the monitor button here, you can see a live view of what's actually happening with the tape. So what's happening is we have a tape that we're expecting to find in the drive with a particular name. So you can see P5 reports that it found that tape by starting to read the actual header on the tape. Now it positions the tape to the end of the data already on there. And once it's done that, it'll start saving that selection of files that we saw. Excuse me. And when they've been written to tape, what we do is we take each of those JPEGs and the MPEG-4 and we generate a thumbnail from it, which is what's happening right now. So those thumbnails are then stored within P5's database so that you can see those files even after they've been removed from the QNAP itself. So if we go back to the QNAP and I do a little refresh on this folder, remember I archived all but one of those files. So there's the one that we didn't archive, and I now have a load of space freed up on the QNAP so that it's not filling up anymore. And I can get on with the next job. So down the line, when I recall that I did that job and maybe want to see what was in it and maybe recover some of it back to the QNAP, within the P5 web interface again, over here on the restore side, in that tab, I can go to my archive. See, I've got backup and replication here as well. I'm interested in the multimedia share from the QNAP, and there's a folder called webinar that you can see was archived on the 19th of June in the afternoon. So if I double click on here, you can see what was in that folder, including the thumbnails. So on the right hand side, we have a preview of the JPEGs and so on that were in the folder. If I double click up here on the movie, I can actually scrub through. Let's just turn the volume down. I can scrub through the first 10 seconds or whatever I want. I could have the whole movie in there so that I can get a feel for what it is that I've archived that I might want to recover. And then if I decide I want to recover, let's say, some number of these files, I can create a restore selection of the files I want to recover. I could browse around the index again and maybe choose all kinds of different projects to restore in one go. And then the restore process will simply ask me where I want to restore back to, will count and work out how much data I've just selected, and also tells me usefully which tapes I need to recover it, because I might have a shelf with 20 tapes on, so it tells me which tape or tapes I need. And then if I hit start, again, that job is monitored in this interface. So you can see the tape gets rewound. We check it's the right tape again, and then we'll wind out and restore the data. And once the data is restored, it'll be visible again back on the QNAP for me to work on. And interestingly, when I archive a folder that contains any files that have previously been archived, we will detect from our index that those files already exist in the archive and we don't need to archive them again, but we can basically show pointers to the same files in a current folder without needing to archive data that we've already archived. So it's kind of like a simple deduplication interface. So it looks like we're about to restore those 11 files any moment now. And when they come back, we'll be able to see in the QNAP interface back over here. Let's just see if they're already there. Yep, they're back. So maybe there's a few more still to come, but you can see those files have just come back onto the QNAP. So really quick demo there, but I just wanted to show how easy it is. There's really 5 minutes worth of configuration within the product to get to the point where we're doing archiving. It's just a case of adding the tape drive and labeling a tape. So really simple. And the ability to connect an LTO drive to the QNAP means that you get the benefit of the sort of storage capacities that LTO provides. So if I just pull up a pointer here, so the current generation of LTO is generation 8, which has been out for about a year. Bit of a shortage of LTO tapes available at the moment, but I'm told that's going to be fixed. LTO 8 is 12 terabytes worth of capacity per tape. So buy yourself 5 or 6 tapes and you've got quite a decent archiving capacity. And interestingly, the write speed, once you've got the tape positioned and you're writing data, is 360 megabytes a second. So we can keep up with a pretty fast storage connected in the QNAP. And then next year we'll be looking at LTO 9, where we double the capacity. So if you buy an LTO 9 drive, you'll be able to read and write LTO 8 tapes as well. So yeah, the LTO is a great format for archiving and backup, particularly from NAS devices. Single drive doesn't have to cost a huge amount of money, and the tapes are relatively cheap. So the cost per terabyte for archive and backup capacity on LTO really quite attractive. Thanks everybody for attending. There will be a copy of this video up on YouTube if anybody wants to share it with anybody that couldn't make it. And you've got our email addresses, so if you've got any questions or any further info that you'd like, or if you'd like to get hold of a demo of the software yourself, then just get in touch.